Peter Weir was born in the suburbs of Sydney, Australia. After college, he decided to work in the entertainment business and started by being a stagehand for TV networks and made short films with his co-workers. His first feature film put him on the map, but it wasn't until his films like Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Last Wave that he was given international acclaim. He put actors like Mel Gibson and Jim Carrey into the dramatic limelight. Jim Carrey wasn't taken seriously as a dramatic actor until his role in The Truman Show, one of the films that I will be discussing today. Weir was one of the pioneers of Australian cinema. I will be discussing the major theme of 3 of his films, and that theme centers around finding an identity and authenticity in the modern world. Before diving into these films, I want to discuss a few techniques Weir uses when making a film. He believes that sound is way more important than the visual component of a film. He believes the use of music is the most important part of any movie, not just in the edit, but in the writing process too. Weir gets much of his inspiration for his films from music.
I find music is more important to me than the visual when I'm working on a script. Some directors, make up wonderful, thick books of visual material. But for me, music, I didn't mention in the talk, is probably the most primary tool I use in script, shoot, and cut. I play it against dailies. I play it against cuts where I turn the sound down, just play music. I make up CDs. And so from that music, I'll say, this piece of music has that emotion in it, of that scene. So anyway, my advice is, do the opposite of what you think. Don't worry about the visual. Go for sound, music, and see what bubbles up.
This doesn't mean that Weir doesn't focus on visual elements too. He is a big believer in the close-up.
He said the silent cinema was fundamentally built on close-ups, which worked with the Academy format anyway. And he said, I think the top stars created a kind of hypnotic effect on the audience. He said, when we look back today, the stories can look rather thin or a bit corny or a bit silly or a bit obvious. But he said that wasn't the way it was when you watched them then, because that wasn't what you were looking for. It was this face coming at you. And his key word, or the word he came closest to, was hypnotism. Even in this recent film I tried to use that way of thinking sometimes, to just hold on a face for a while, strip it of dialogue, almost as a reaction against the cluttered screen of today, where our heads are cluttered with imagery, bombarded with imagery. You almost have to plan not to be, not put the television on or not look at the internet or something if you want to try and keep your head clear. You can see anything and everything.
We can see a lot of these close-ups in his films, where a great deal of time is spent on a character's face, usually with no dialogue. It is hypnotizing to look at a face on the big screen. You can see into the character's soul, you know how they feel, what they think. And to get the perfect close-up, you need the perfect face. Casting a film is another thing Weir takes very seriously.
But just in general, how do you cast a film? How do you go about nominating a lead? Do you know their performances? Do you think they'd be great in this role? Have you seen that role played by them before in some guise?
Sometimes in my own mind I've thought it was like the Missing Persons Bureau, and I'm a detective, and there's a great deal to be made by somebody coming forward claiming to be this person. So often when I'm interviewing them, I'm trying to see who's the real one. Others are pretending to be that person. So sometimes they're performances I've seen, but the meeting's terribly important. Really the casting is a mix of the words and the test, but more importantly it's sort of something else unmeasured through the air. Now, it's not to say you're looking for a pal or you're looking for somebody to be your friend or something, someone you like, but I think actually it's whether you can communicate. I think most of the communicating between director and actor is non-verbal. sometimes the casting director can be puzzled when you take someone who seems to be less qualified than somebody else. You say, I don't know, it just feels right.
Weir helped make a star out of Mel Gibson and showed the world that Jim Carrey is not just a comedian, but also a commanding presence in dramatic films. This leads us into Weir's most successful film, The Truman Show. Jim Carrey stars as Truman Burbank, a man born into a reality TV show that has live coverage on his life 24/7. The town he lives in is completely constructed for him. Although everything in his life is inauthentic, Truman himself is genuine. This is what the creator of the show, Christof, states in an interview, but Weir clearly shows us that Truman's identity is whatever Christof wants it to be. They make him afraid of water. They force a girlfriend onto him, who eventually becomes his wife. They put subtle cues everywhere to subconsciously change Truman's thoughts and behavior. He has dreams of a different life, and of being with a different woman. Truman longs to be with Sylvia, one of the characters who tried to tell Truman the truth about his life. Christof kicked her off the show once this happened, and Truman has been trying to replicate her face with magazine cutouts. Once Truman becomes suspicious and finally escapes the set of his giant show, he is now free to begin an authentic life with Sylvia in the real world. The next film was Weir's first Hollywood gig, the film Witness, starring Harrison Ford. In this fish-out-of-water story, Ford plays John Book, a good cop that must protect a young Amish boy who is the sole witness to a murder. He has to live within the Amish community and blend in to protect the boy and his mother. The film is less about the crime itself and more about John Book's immersion into the Amish world. He has to adopt a new identity in order to protect the boy. While doing this, he forms a romantic relationship with the mother, Rachel. Weir really focuses in on this romance, and I think the film is really about their relationship. They come from completely different worlds, and they can't be together unless John becomes Amish or Rachel leaves the Amish. This clash of identity is the heart of the film. The last Weir film I'll talk about is Fearless, starring Jeff Bridges. Bridges plays Max Klein, an architect who survived a plane crash and walked away from the crash with a newfound appreciation for life. He claims he's not afraid of anything anymore and lives much more carelessly. Instead of going home to his wife and son right after the crash, he rents a car and visits an old friend. Throughout the film, Weir shows us how Max is neglecting his wife and son and all his other responsibilities. He wants to escape his old identity. The crash made him realize this, and his new identity is this Good Samaritan persona. He's good at helping people now, but it's at his expense. He spends a lot of time with a woman named Carla, who lost her baby in the crash. He focuses too much on her problems and not enough on his own problems. He even drives his car into a brick wall just to prove a point to Carla. He also spends more time with a boy that he sat with on the plane than his own son, who is becoming jealous. But in the end, after another near-death experience, Max realizes that he has to come back to Earth. He was on the verge of leaving his wife and son behind, but he decided to stay with them, reclaim his old identity, and continue his life how it was before the crash. Peter Weir's films have left powerful impressions on me. Watching films like Dead Poets Society and Truman Show for the first time were super memorable experiences. And after watching many interviews and doing research on him, I've learned a lot of his techniques that I'm going to incorporate in my own creative process.